In the middle of the Rajasthani desert, between Jaipur and Alwar, there is a ruined town where nobody sleeps at night. The houses are empty. The markets have no traders. The palace has no king. And at the gate, a government sign warns you in plain language. Entering the borders of Bhangarh before sunrise and after sunset is strictly prohibited. Legal action will be taken against anyone who does not follow these instructions. This is Bhangarh Fort in Rajasthan, India. By day, it's a spectacular historical ruin. Temples, palaces, and broken streets lying in the shadow of the Aravalli Hills. By night, it's known as India's most haunted fort, a place people say is cursed, abandoned, and watched over by things that only wake up after dark. Tonight, we're going to walk through the empty streets of Bhangarh, look at what really happened to this town, and hear the legends that turned it into one of the most infamous ghost stories in India. Bhangarh sits in the Alwar district of Rajasthan on the edge of the Sariska Tiger Reserve, backed by low hills of the Aravalli range. From above, it looks like a natural bowl. The fort and town at the base, hills rising behind, and dry plains stretching out in front. A rocky ridge forms a kind of backdrop behind the palace, and a stream trickles down from the hills into a pond within the complex. To get here from Jaipur or Delhi, you follow paved highways and small villages, and then suddenly, in the last stretch, the tarmac breaks into a rough, unpaved road. You pass a small modern village called Bhangarh, home to a few hundred people, sitting safely outside the fort's old boundary. Inside those boundaries, nobody lives. What remains is an entire ruined town spread out beneath the fort. Gateways and watchtowers, a long, empty bazaar street, Havalis, where merchants once lived, a dancer's house, and a palace rising up the slope, and several temples, still partly intact, standing in the open courtyards. It feels less like a single fort and more like an entire city frozen at the moment it emptied. Behind the ghost stories, there is a well-documented timeline. Bhangarh Fort was founded in the late 16th century by Raja Bhagwant Das, a powerful Rajput ruler of Amber. He established Bhangarh as the seat of his second son, Madho Singh, creating a planned town with palace, temples, and markets. At its peak, this was not a tiny outpost. Rajasthan tourism sources and travel writers suggest there were thousands of residents, with one estimate mentioning around 9,000 houses inside the town before it began to decline. The fort sat on trade routes, with a bazaar lined by shops, a hierarchy of housing running up towards the royal palace, and temples positioned in different directions as markers of power and protection. So what went wrong? Historically, there's no single dramatic event recorded as the curse that destroyed Bhangarh. Instead, records suggest a gradual decline, shifting politics, war in the wider region, and then, around the late 18th century, a severe famine that hit this part of Rajasthan. By the early 1800s, the town was largely abandoned. The buildings fell into ruin. Trees grew up through the courtyards. New villages formed outside the old walls, on safer ground. That's the dry, historical version. The legends tell a very different story. The first famous legend of Bhangarh is about a holy man, or sadhu, who lived on the hillside above the town. According to this story, before the fort was built, the king asked this ascetic, often called Guru Balu Nath, for permission to construct the town in his valley. The sadhu agreed, but set a strict condition. No building in Bhangarh should ever be tall enough for its shadow to fall on his dwelling. As long as the town respected that rule, it would prosper. For a time, everything went well. Houses, markets, and temples rose, but no one built higher than the holy man's retreat. Then, as the story goes, a later ruler got ambitious. He wanted a bigger palace, taller walls, more towers. Columns were added to the fort complex, and one day, as the sun moved across the sky, the shadow of those towers finally fell on the sadhu's home. The holy man was furious. In his anger, he cursed Bhangarh, declaring that the town would fall into ruin. Its people would be forced to leave, and no roof built within its bounds would ever stand for long. Even today, locals will quietly tell you that if you try to build a full, permanent roof inside the old fort area, it will crack or collapse. It's hard to separate superstition from structural decay, but the idea has taken hold. This is a place that refuses to be lived in. The second major legend is more dramatic and more personal. In this version, the town of Bhangarh is thriving. The markets are full, the palace is busy, and the most talked about person in the region is a beautiful princess. Depending on who tells the story, she is sometimes called Ratnavati, sometimes given other names, but she is always described the same way: clever, graceful, and constantly surrounded by suitors. Among those who fall in love with her is a tantric, a practitioner of black magic living near the town. He knows he can never win her honestly, so he decides to use magic instead. The most common version of the story goes like this. One day, the princess sends her maid to buy attar, a scented oil, from the market. The sorcerer sees this as his chance. He enchants the bottle, turning the perfume into a love potion. If the princess uses it, he believes, she will lose her will and come to him. But the princess is not foolish. She notices something strange about the bottle, the way the seller behaves, or the way the liquid moves. Realizing it has been tampered with, she hurls it away. The potion spills onto a nearby stone boulder. The rock, now carrying the spell, begins to move. It rolls towards the sorcerer and crushes him to death. As he dies, he curses Bhangarh that the town will fall, that it will be left empty, and that no one who lives there will find peace. Soon after, neighboring kingdoms attack. War, famine, and political change strip away Bhangarh's wealth. Eventually, its people flee, leaving only walls and stories behind. In this telling, Bhangarh is not just abandoned, it is cursed by a dying magician whose spell still lingers on the stones. Whichever legend you prefer, the sadhu's shadow, the sorcerer and the princess, or a mix of both, their effect today is the same. Bhangarh has become a magnet for ghost stories. Visitors and locals describe strange whispers in empty courtyards, the sound of anklets and bangles, as if a woman is walking through the old palace, sudden pockets of cold air in the heat, and a strong sense of being watched, especially near the ruined market and the upper levels of the palace. Some say they have heard music from the Nachan Ki Haveli, the dancer's house, at night, or seen figures moving among the arches of temples long after the sun has gone down. A common belief is that anyone who dares to stay inside the fort after dark will not be seen again. That part is more rumor than fact, but it's repeated so often that it has become part of the place's identity. The Indian media, travel sites, and even international outlets now routinely refer to Bhangarh as India's most haunted, or even one of the most haunted places in Asia. And then there's that sign. The Archaeological Survey of India, the ASI, who manage the ruins, have placed an official board at the entrance prohibiting entry between sunset and sunrise. Not recommended to avoid, not visit at your own risk, just a straightforward ban with legal consequences if you break it. They don't officially endorse the ghost stories. Their concern is safety and heritage protection. But for most visitors, the message is simple. Once the light begins to fade, everybody out. The town belongs to other things at night. If you visit Bhangarh in the daytime, you'll see how the myths and the stonework feed each other. You pass through the main gate and find a cluster of temples just inside. Shrines to Hanuman, Gopinath, Someshwar, and others, some built more like cenotaphs than classic temple forms. Past them is the Jauhari Bazaar, the jeweller's market, a straight street lined with roofless shops. Their stone fronts opened like dollhouses. Above them, on the slope, stands the Nachan Ki Haveli, the House of Dancers, and further again, the remains of the royal palace clinging to the hillside. On a bright afternoon, it can feel almost peaceful. Monkeys move along the walls. Goats wander through temple courtyards. Tourists take photos and read plaques. But because everyone knows they cannot stay after dark, there is a sense of time counting down. As the sun drops behind the hills, you can feel the energy change. Guides gathering their groups, guards starting to call people back towards the gate, shadows stretching long across the broken streets. For locals in the modern village outside, the rules are just a normal part of life. They collect firewood near the fort, graze animals in the area, and then go home. The ruins are their backyard, but not their sleeping place. No matter how crowded it gets during the day, by night, Bhangarh is empty of human residents. That emptiness is what fuels much of its haunted reputation. So is Bhangarh really cursed? From a practical angle, there are some obvious reasons why the town declined without needing black magic. It sits in a harsh, semi-arid landscape where water can be unreliable. The late 18th century saw major famine in the region, which would have pushed people to relocate to more secure settlements. Political power shifted, trade routes changed, and small forts like Bhangarh lost their importance. As for the ban on night entry, there are again straightforward reasons. The ruins are structurally unstable in places. There are steep drops, unlit staircases, and wildlife nearby. In the dark, it would be very easy to fall, get injured, or get lost. You don't need ghosts to justify closing an unlit ruin in tiger country at night. But myth is rarely about what we need, it's about what we feel. Bhangarh is a perfect storm for storytelling. A whole abandoned town, dramatic ruins in a bowl of hills, a genuine sense of isolation at dusk, and just enough historical mystery to leave gaps. Those gaps get filled with curses, sorcerers, holy men, and restless spirits. And over time, the stories become as real as the stones in how people experience the place. So, what is Bhangarh Fort really? A cursed city crushed by a dying magician. A proud town destroyed by a holy man's anger when his conditions were broken? Or a historical settlement that slowly collapsed under famine, war, and the hard mathematics of survival in the desert? The truth is probably a mix. The stones tell us that Bhangarh was once rich, organized, and busy. The records tell us it declined over time and was abandoned after hard years. The legends tell us how people felt about that loss, how they turned grief, fear, and empty streets into stories of curses and ghosts. If you ever visit Bhangarh yourself, you'll feel all three at once. In the heat of the day, you'll see the planning, the architecture, the way the town once worked. As the shadows get longer, you'll start to understand why people talk about spirits waking up after sunset. And when the guards finally wave everyone out through the gate and you step back onto the rough track to the modern village, you may find yourself glancing over your shoulder at the walls one last time. Not because you've just seen a ghost, but because there is something unsettling about a place that once held thousands of lives, now standing silent under the hills, legally off limits at night, with a reputation that stretches far beyond Rajasthan. Haunted or not, Bhangarh Fort is a reminder of how quickly a thriving town can become a story, and how, once a place is called cursed, it can be very hard for the living to move back in. So if you want more haunted places, cursed towns, and dangerous locations like this, hit subscribe, tap the bell for all notifications, and I'll see you in the next story.